It's 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and you're scrolling Marketplace in bed, half asleep, thumb moving on autopilot past couches and treadmills when you see it. A business. Not a product. A business. Listed for $500, same price as a used mattress, same price as 3 months of a car payment you're already behind on. The listing photo is a blurry storefront sign taken at a bad angle. The description is 4 sentences long, and the seller wrote, "Must sell, moving, make an offer," like they're trying to get rid of a couch, not an entire operating business with a tax ED and a customer list and a lease that somebody still has to pay. Here's what nobody tells you about that moment. A business selling for $500 is not a bargain. It is a body. Something died in there, and the person listing it just wants the corpse off their hands before it costs them another cent. The real price of that business was never $500. The real price is whatever it costs to find out why it failed, and that number is almost always higher than what killed it the first time. Let's put this on a ladder, because $500 means different things depending on what's underneath it. On the low end, you've got a dead Etsy shop, digital only, no inventory, no lease, just a login and a few hundred email subscribers who haven't opened anything in a year. Middling risk. In the average range, you've got something like a small service business, a cleaning route or a mobile detailing operation, physical equipment involved, maybe a domain and some client contracts that may or may not still be honored. Real risk, real upside. And at the extreme end, you've got what this seller has. A brick-and-mortar retail shop with 11 months left on a commercial lease, a walk-in cooler that hasn't been serviced in 2 years, and 4 employees who haven't been told the business is being sold out from under them. That's not a $500 business. That's a $500 down payment on somebody else's failure. Here's the line I want you to sit with before we go further. You never buy a cheap business. You buy an expensive problem at a discount. Here's how it actually works once the money changes hands. The mechanism that makes a $500 business possible is the same mechanism that makes a foreclosed house possible. Distress compresses price faster than it compresses cost. The seller isn't pricing the business based on its assets, its inventory, its brand equity, or its future cash flow. They're pricing it based on how badly they want to stop feeling the pain of owning it. That's an emotional price, not a financial one, and the gap between those two numbers is where you either make money or lose your shirt. Let's do the actual math on this specific kind of deal, because vague numbers don't teach you anything. Say the shop's lease is $1,800 a month, with 11 months left, which is $19,800 in fixed obligation you just inherited the moment you signed the assignment paperwork. The walk-in cooler needs a compressor repair. Call it $1,100 because nobody defers maintenance on a business they're proud of. Rebranding, even the cheap version, new signage, new packaging, a basic website, runs you around $2,200 if you're doing most of it yourself. Add in 60 days of payroll for those 4 employees while you figure out whether to keep them. At an average of $3,200 a month combined, that's $6,400. Total real investment before you've sold a single item under your ownership, $29,500 on a $500 sticker price. Here's the twist that makes it worse. That $29,500 number assumes nothing else breaks. It assumes the point of sale system still works, the health permit transfers cleanly, none of the equipment needs replacing instead of repairing, and the landlord actually approves the lease assignment instead of using the ownership change as an excuse to renegotiate the terms in their favor, which happens far more often than new owners expect. Distressed businesses are distressed for a reason, and that reason rarely announces itself on day one. It shows up in week 3 as a second problem, then a third. Zoom out, and this stops being one unlucky story. A commonly cited figure in small business research is that around 20% of new businesses fail within their first year, and by year 5, that number climbs past 50%. Every single one of those failures eventually becomes a marketplace listing, a Craigslist post, a whispered conversation at a Chamber of Commerce mixer, someone trying to hand off the wreckage before it finishes sinking. The $500 listing you found last night isn't a hidden gem nobody else noticed. It's the tail end of somebody else's math not working out. Price them. To disappear fast. The seller doesn't care what happens to you after the deal closes. They care that their name comes off the lease. Now let's put a person inside this, because statistics don't feel real until they have a face attached to them. Meet Daniel. 34 years old, works a rotating shift at a regional distribution center, brings home about $52,000 a year after taxes, so somewhere around $4,300 a month hitting his account. He's been watching business flip content for a year, feels behind compared to guys he went to high school with, and he finds a $500 juice bar for sale 2 towns over. He does not have $29,500 sitting around. Nobody making $52,000 a year does. What he has is a credit card with an $11,000 limit, a home equity line his mother-in-law offered to co-sign, and a lot of confidence built from watching other people's highlight reels. Daniel signs the deal on a Thursday. By the following Tuesday, the walk-in cooler is down, he's lost $400 of inventory, and the landlord is asking for a new deposit before approving the lease transfer. By the end of month 2, Daniel has put $14,000 on that credit card at an interest rate north of 24%, which means he's not just out $14,000, he's accumulating roughly $280 a month in interest alone before he's paid down a cent of principal. His disposable income, the $400 or so a month he used to have left over after rent and groceries and his car payment, is gone. Not tight, gone. He is now paying to own a business that isn't paying him anything back. Now you might be thinking, that's Daniel's problem. He didn't do his diligence. I'd check the lease first. I'd inspect the equipment. I'm different. And sure, some of that risk is manageable with real diligence. But here's the data that should slow you down. Among people who buy an existing small business rather than starting from scratch, industry surveys on business brokerage consistently show that a meaningful share of buyers report the business needed significantly more capital post-purchase than they were told going in, precisely because sellers in distress have every incentive to undersell the problems, and buyers in a hurry have every incentive to not ask the hard question twice. This isn't a Daniel problem. This is a structural feature of buying anything that somebody else is desperate to unload. Daniel isn't foolish. Daniel is impatient, and impatience is the tax that distressed sellers are counting on. So what's the alternative? Because I'm not telling you to never buy a business, I'm telling you to buy the boring version of this decision instead of the exciting one. The boring alternative is this. Instead of buying the $500 business with the $29,500 real cost, you take that same $29,500, or even a fraction of it, and you put it into something that doesn't require you to also become an unpaid crisis manager. Say Daniel, instead of chasing the juice bar, puts $300 a month, the same amount he was about to lose to credit card interest, into a low-cost index fund. Not exciting. Not a story he can tell at a barbecue. Just $300, automatic, every single month. Run that $300 a month at a conservative long-run average return of around 7% annually, over 25 years, and Daniel ends up with somewhere in the neighborhood of $240,000 from money that would have otherwise funded a walk-in cooler repair and a lease he didn't fully understand. Here's who actually profits when Daniel buys the flashy version instead. The original seller who gets the lease liability off their credit and their name off the hook. The landlord who gets to renegotiate a new lease at a higher rate under the excuse of ownership change. The equipment repair company who gets an emergency service call at emergency service rates. The credit card company collecting 24% while Daniel collects nothing. Everyone in that chain gets paid the moment Daniel signs. Daniel gets paid only if everything else in the deal goes right, and distressed businesses rarely let everything go right. So here's what I actually want you to do today, not someday, today. If you're eyeing a cheap business listing right now, open a blank note on your phone and write down every single cost beyond the sticker price, the lease, the repairs, the rebrand, the payroll gap, before you write down a single dollar of projected revenue. If that number is smaller than what you'd need, or smaller than what you're comfortable losing completely, that's your answer. And to be fair, this isn't universal. If you already run a business in the same category, if you know exactly what a walk-in cooler repair costs because you've paid for one before, if you have cash reserves that don't touch your rent money, buying distressed can absolutely work. And plenty of people have built real wealth exactly this way. This video isn't for you. This video is for the person about to put a business on a credit card because a thumbnail made it look easy. Because the boldest financial decision most people will ever make isn't the flashy $500 leap everyone claps for. It's opening the account nobody's impressed by, putting in the same amount every single month, and having the discipline to let something boring get quietly, enormously rich.